For I am Lord of Deadside.
What happens when you mix Zelda, Tomb Raider, Voodoo lore, an apocalyptic prophecy, Jack the Ripper, and an immortal anti-hero destined to face the ultimate evil? You get Shadowman. Developed by acclaimed Studios Deadside, Shadowman is an action-adventure game based on the comic book of the same name published by Valiant Comics. From New York to the limbo known as Deadside, and from an abandoned London metro station to an ancient blood temple steeped in voodoo lore, Shadowman plunges you into one of the darkest and most fascinating horror adventures, a journey that to this day captivates the minds and hearts of those who played it back in 1999. In this Iceberg, we'll explore the secrets, lore, mysteries, unused content and more behind Michael Leroi's dark fate in Deadside. Welcome to the Shadowman Iceberg.
Say my name, EisenBerg. You're goddamn right.
Liveside and Deadside. The concept of different planes of existence is as ancient as human civilization. The existence of heaven, hell, purgatory and other dimensions in religion are examples of places where humans end up after they die. Nonetheless, in the Shadowman universe, we have two main places, Liveside and Deadside. Liveside is the place where we live our mortal lives. However, Deadside is the place where everyone goes without exception when they die. That means that no matter how good or bad you are, your existence will transcend into Deadside, a place that, if you think about it, looks like hell. Just think about the playrooms, the experimentation rooms, or the asylum in general. However, you would be surprised that this isn't hell nor the final destination of all souls that end up there, but the answer to this will be awaiting deeper under the iceberg. Red Pepper. What would Shadowman be without Red Pepper? This Barbadian British voice actor is also known for being the voice behind many movie trailers. His unusual deep voice gave life to Michael Leroi and Shadowman in both games. There's no way I could imagine Shadowman without Red Pepper's voice, and because of that, I hope that if there's a new Shadowman video game starring Michael Leroi, he comes back to reprise his role as the Lord of Deadside.
Weapon in my hand, the arcing death blow at the end of all things. The horror, I embrace it.
Mike's backstory. One of the things about Shadowman the video game is that a lot of information about the backstory of Michael Leroi is missing and can be found among other sources in the comics. Michael Leroi is a 32-year-old English literature dropout who started gambling. Due to this, he had to work as a taxi driver. However, one day, one of his passengers was killed in a drive-by shooting, leaving behind a suitcase with $20,000 on the backseat. Mike kept the money to help his brother look for a surgery he needed. But not too long after this, one of the gang members tracked Mike down, asking for his money. Instead of giving it back, he sought the help of a Bokor to protect him and his family. Due to his refusal, the gang opened fire to the car where Mike, his parents and Luke were. This resulted in everyone dying but Mike, who barely escaped death thanks to the Bokor's power. But that wasn't enough to protect Mike's family. Mike was in a coma for a year until he woke up without any memories of his family. He started drinking at a local bar called the Wild at Heart, where the Bokor who protected Mike found him and enslaved him to become a hitman known as Zero. Nonetheless, a voodoo priestess known as Mama Nettie took revenge on the Bokor and took Mike to implant the Mask of Shadows on his chest. Memories of his family started coming back, tormenting his mind with guilt and regret. This is where the game picks up, as Nettie has a prophetic dream about the arrival of Legion and the Heralds of Apocalypse known as the Five, an event that had been developing since 1888 when Legion asked Jack the Ripper to build the asylum. Govey and the Dark Souls. Not too much is known about the Dark Souls, other than they predate the Shadowmen and that once were found inside evil creatures led by Legion. Once Legion was defeated, some of his army's Dark Souls were sealed into Govi, vessels that not even the most powerful Bokor or Mambo could open. The only beings capable of opening them are Shadowmen and Surgeons, although through great effort. Their task is to transplant them into monstrosities known as true forms, Legion's new army to take over Lifeside. It is said that any mortal being in possession of a Dark Soul would be driven into madness. In fact, Michael Leroi is capable of controlling their immense power because the Mask of Shadows allows him to channel this powerful evil energy. The five are also in possession of Dark Souls, but unlike Mike, they lack anything to channel their power, twisting their minds beyond those of the most cruel serial killers humankind has ever seen. Mask of Shadows. The Mask of Shadows is a voodoo artifact that allows Shadowmen to channel the power of the Dark Souls. It's worth noting that out of all the Shadowmen, Mike is the only one that has it on his chest, as Mama Nettie knitted it onto his ribs. This turned Mike into a slave of the voodoo priestess, in contrast to other Shadowmen who wear it on their face. If any mortal being were to get their hands on any Dark Souls same as the five, they would be driven into madness. Shadow Gun Sound Effect. There's an anecdote in the official guide for Shadowman that states that the sound effect for the Shadow Gun was made out of a composite of several sounds, including vulture screech, thunderclap, human moaning, and baby crying, among others. Talking about it, the Shadow Gun sound effect was modified for the remaster because in the original, the sound could get on some players' nerves after hearing it for a long time. In the remaster, when the Shadow Gun isn't powered up, it will emit a brief sound. This reminds me of SuperGreatFriend because I think he replaced the sound file of the Shadow Gun with other different sounds to avoid the annoyance of the original sound effect. Legion.
And he asked him, "What is thy name?" And he replied, "My name is Legion, for we are many."
Who is he that Legion refers to when mentioning this iconic quote from Mark 5 verse 9 from the Christian Bible? The character in question is none other than Jesus Christ. When Jesus travels to the Gerasenes, he is met by a man possessed by multiple demons. Jesus demands the demon's name and he replies with the name Legion, referring to a division of the Roman army, usually comprising 3,000 to 6,000 soldiers. This is a reference to the number of diabolical entities inside the man. In spite of the sheer number of spirits, they beg not to be sent into the abyss, and instead, they beg Jesus to cast them into a nearby herd of pigs that rush down a steep bank and drown in the lake. In the Shadowman universe, these demons' request not to be sent into the abyss is probably the reason why we saw Legion come back and trigger the events of the game. The Five. The Five refers to the group of serial killers that are recruited by Legion since 1888 to wreak havoc in Lifeside with the aid of the Dark Souls implanted into their bodies. The first of them is John Pierce, also known as Jack the Ripper, a serial killer from the Victorian era that took the lives of several women searching for the existence of a soul. After discovering the existence of Dark Souls to be real, he's convinced by Legion to take his own life and build the asylum in Deadside to carry out his master's plan of projecting his immortal army across the veil to Lifeside and bring about the apocalypse. After his job is done in Deadside, Jack the Ripper gets one of Legion's Dark Souls and goes back to Lifeside in 1999 to kill other victims and announce that the apocalypse is approaching. Avery Marks, or the Home Improvement Killer, drew inspiration from Buffalo Bill from The Silence of the Lambs, mainly because both have been seen wearing night goggles to hunt down some of their victims. Also, they use their victims' skin for different purposes, such as making furniture or women's suits in the case of Buffalo. Both serial killers share a connection with certain animals, as Buffalo raises Death's Head hogmoths while Avery marks canaries. Although the leader of the five is yet to be seen, Avery Marks is by far the most deranged of all serial killers in the Shadowman universe. In fact, deeper in this iceberg, we'll get to listen to the tapes that this home improvement killer recorded of his victims. Vietnam veteran Milton Pike, also known as the Nasty Video Killer, was dishonorably discharged due to an incident with a female officer. He also worked fixing televisions and as a forest ranger at a natural preserve with a specialty in alligator preservation. He's known for taking the lives of at least 29 people, including his own mother. As his nickname implies, some of these events were recorded on videotape. Marco Roberto Cruz's modus operandi involved forcing his victims off the road, incapacitating them with a cattle prod, and finally stowing their bodies in the back of his pickup truck before towing away their wrecked vehicles. He also worked as a DJ, and he's one of the most iconic serial killers in Shadowman due to his flamboyant personality and his love of disco music. There's artwork of Cruz, where he bears a striking resemblance to Max Cady, the character portrayed by Robert De Niro in Cape Fear. It's important to highlight that along with the leader of the five, Marco and Milton share the same level in the original game, being that the Gardell County Penitentiary due to time constraints and technical limitations. Nonetheless, each of them received their own stage in the remaster. Finally, Dr. Victor Batrakian, or the Lizard King, is the right hand of Legion, and his appearance reminds us of Hannibal Lecter. In fact, in the German dub, Batrakian is apparently dubbed by Ralph Schult, the same voice actor that dubbed Anthony Hopkins in The Silence of the Lambs.
Nennen Sie mich nicht so. Ich bin der Todesengel, der Echsenkönig. Sehen Sie nicht, was ich hier bewirkt habe?
Was ist es in sich selbst? Was ist seine Natur?
He was involved in an insurance fraud where he took the lives of 5 of his wealthy patients who suspiciously had willed him their entire fortunes. In 1996, the corpse of a young man whose head had literally exploded was found with a strange symbol used by Batrakian. This kind of supernatural death meant that Victor was already under the influence of the Dark Soul's power. These head explosions are witnessed by Mike when he travels to the Gardell County Penitentiary. True Forms. The True Forms are abominations crafted by the Surgeons under Legion's command. Their ultimate purpose is to house the Dark Souls, granting them power to breach Lifeside and bring about the apocalypse. In ancient times, Legion commanded an army with all Dark Souls, but that force was eventually defeated. If you examine Le Carte, you'll find depictions of the original beings that once bore these souls, and you might think that they're the same True Forms that we see in the Asylum, but in fact, those are made by the Surgeons to resemble Legion's army in ancient times. From what I've seen across Deadside, the Hookmen roam its desolate landscapes, capturing Deadsiders and tearing them apart to harvest their flesh. They use these remains to sculpt grotesque meat statues, which are then passed to the Surgeons who mold them into True Forms. The Blood Sisters. The Blood Sisters are the guardians of Govi and therefore the Dark Souls. I'm not quite sure if the Blood Sisters were responsible for sealing the Dark Souls into Govi, but it's known that many of them are under their protection. There are 3 types of them: Acolyte, Adept, and Matriarch. Besides being of a different color, their difference lies in their abilities and power. The Prophecy. Long before the Men of Shadow, creatures with souls of evil did descend upon the worlds. Immortals, they were led by the one who is many, he who bears the mouth of blood. After the longest of battles, he was defeated and banished to a place beyond the worlds, and the dark souls of his armies were sealed into Govi, and the Sisters of Blood were entrusted with the Govi, and for many lifetimes the dark souls lay under their protection. And then, the one who is many did return from the place beyond worlds. Under his banner did he unite the madmen and killers, and they did build the asylum in the world of the dead. And sending his minions throughout the world of the dead, he gathered the dark souls that were not under the sisters' protection. Using their dreaded power, he summoned the 5 mortal men who would do his bidding, and they built for him gateways of souls into the world of men. So the 5 did appear to the sorceress, and their Lizard King did announce the apocalypse with the cries of 1,000 men. And in her darkest hour, the sorceress did call upon the Man of of Shadow, and the serpent did guard the Marrow Gates until the Shadow returned to the world of the dead, and thence did the serpent become his advisor, for the Man of Shadow did open the Coffin Gates, and for the first time in 100 years were the paths of Shadow walked. The Man of Shadow did break the sister's spell on the Govi, and in taking the Dark Soul's power, he did unite it within him. With greater power, the Man of Shadow finally entered the Asylum and did find the gateways within that led to the world of man, and he passed beyond them and did confront the five, but in the broad light of day did he fall to them, and the sorceress fell into a deep trance, her powers exhausted, and the Shadow did fall upon the world of men, and Legion took the power of the Dark Souls onto him. The end. This is the prophecy, though once believed to have been written by ancient benevolent deities to warn the Shadow Man of an impending evil, it was in reality crafted by Legion himself, a revelation Mike tried desperately to deny, only to find that the more he resisted it, the closer it came to being fulfilled. Shadowman ports. Shadowman had such an impact when I first saw its gameplay that to this day I still remember that moment in detail. I dropped by my cousin's house when I was around 9 and I remember he was playing N64. I saw the TV screen with the character shooting blue beams and I asked him, "Is that Turok?" He said, "It's Shadowman," and he let me play the game. A couple of months after, a friend of mine called Alejandro, a 9 or 10-year-old kid such as myself back then, had Shadowman for the N64 as well, so we used to play it when he visited my house. After a couple of times he lent me the game, and that's how I got into Shadowman from a very young age. My point is that back then I only knew about the existence of the N64 port. When my family and I got our first PC with internet connection, I was able to find out that Shadowman had more than one version. The N64 port was the mid-quality version of the game, and back then the graphics were quite appealing, at least for me. Shadowman on DreamCast was a dream because I didn't know the game could look that good. On PC, it looked more real than reality itself, but when I saw the PS1 version, I realized it was a horror I wasn't willing to embrace. As a CD-ROM based console, the PS1 version's sole advantage was the sound quality, in contrast to the heavily compressed voices you could hear in the N64. Other than that, the PlayStation port is widely considered the worst way to experience the game, with framerate drops that can fall as low as an unplayable 10 FPS and nightmarish graphics in the bad sense of the word. It's worth mentioning that there are several differences across the different ports in terms of the items you can collect. For example, in the PC version, collecting all 120 Dark Souls lets you open a level 10 coffin gate containing the Book of Shadows, a collectible filled with concept art from the game. In contrast, the N64 version rewards you with a second Violator, one of the most powerful weapons in the game. In the depths of this iceberg, we'll discover an enhanced version of Shadowman developed more than 2 decades before the release of Shadowman Remastered, but that due to a terrible mistake, it never saw the light of day. Shadowman Remastered. Most of those watching this know that Shadowman, almost out of nowhere, got a remaster after more than 21 years. This is the way that Acclaim had envisioned Shadowman, but due to time constraints and the technological limitations of that era, it wasn't possible to implement it. New levels, restored audio and cutscenes, gameplay improvements, new weapons, new enemies and bosses and many more are included in the ultimate version of Mike's Dark Adventure. This is the way you're supposed to play Shadowman, as even going back to the original PC game can feel quite outdated, let alone the N64 or PS1 ports. Mike's monologues. The poetic and stream of consciousness style that Michael Leroi uses every time he introduces a new area in Deadside has become iconic in Shadowman. With a past steeped in English literature, it's little wonder he speaks in verses laced with darkness and beauty. The Temple of Prophecies and the Temple of Blood's intro are my favorite.
The last of the ancient places lies beyond. These trials of Gad to prove the taker of the souls is me. The Shadowman of prophecy, tested, tried, and placed upon the altar of this damned destiny. For there can only be the one in a long and lusting line of warrior gods. 'Tis I, the proof is plain upon my back, my arms, and in my eyes. I am the one. the Shadowman of Prophecy.
Secrets. Secrets can be unlocked by guiding Mike to hidden or hard-to-reach areas across both Liveside and Deadside. These secrets activate various fun modes, such as playing as a dog, wearing Marco's flamboyant outfit while disco music plays, and much more. Unfortunately, these secrets are purely cosmetic and don't provide any gameplay advantages, as they're only visual changes meant for amusement. The Playroom's theme. This is, without a doubt, one of the most iconic themes in Shadowman. The Playroom's theme is a lullaby that descends into madness, a nightmarish blend of eerie childlike elements and industrial horror that corrupts childhood innocence beyond recognition. As Mike said,
I do not embrace this horror, but rather stand immobile beneath its self-indulgent gaze.
It's worth noting that part of the theme is a remix of Waltz in A-flat major by German composer Johannes Brahms. The Asylum's inspiration. A copy of Peter Sprohol's The Tower of Babel used to hang in an Acclaim's office, inspiring the team to make a game that could take you into a place like that. As you all know, that place turned out to be the Asylum. Respawning after dying is canon. One of Shadowman's abilities is that he cannot die due to his status as an immortal voodoo warrior. In the vast majority of video games, main characters have only one life to complete their journeys, and the story doesn't account for all the times the player dies during gameplay. However, Shadowman is different, as every time he respawns after being defeated, it's not just a game mechanic, it's his immortality manifesting. Schisms. Schisms are mutilated corpses found in the Cathedral of Pain that serve as gateways between Liveside and Deadside. For them to work, the upper half of what resembles a human body must be suspended, with the skull and spinal cord exposed. It's suggested that the person is barely alive while their soul lingers on the threshold between these two planes of existence. This liminal state is what seemingly enables the schisms to act as a bridge between Liveside and Deadside, though a device called a retractor is still required to traverse either world. It's worth mentioning that these devices were created by Jack the Ripper in order to send some of the Dark Souls to Liveside for the serial killers. Getting Govi earlier. There are several Govi that can be obtained in unintended ways. The first one can be found right after the spinning door hut in the wasteland. Normally, you would need to be able to walk on hot coals, but you can actually make this jump by doing it from the very edge of the floor. The other two are in the Temple of Fire, more specifically, the ones that are on both sides of the step pyramid. If you jump at the very edge of the first step, you can reach the Govi and collect their Dark Souls. This worked in the N64 version of the game, but it's been fixed in the remaster. Voodoo items exist in real life. According to the Acclaim's official strategy guide for Shadowman, voodoo weapons in the game are based on actual voodoo items. For example, the baton is a short ceremonial spear, the calabash is a gourd which holds the spirit of magic within it, and the asan is the term used to describe the sacred rattle of the mambo or voodoo priestess. The Lowa. The Lowa are spirits in Haitian voodoo that serve as intermediaries between humans and Bondi, the supreme but distant creator god. These entities are mentioned in the Shadowman universe as powerful benevolent deities who aid Mike, for example, by increasing his life through the offering of 100 Kado. Lavaducts Deja Vu. The Lavaducts is one of my least favorite levels in the game. This is mainly due to how often I would get lost, especially considering that there are two nearly identical lava mixer rooms. This is actually acknowledged by a claim in the strategy guide. Maxim St James. Michael Leroi is probably the most popular Shadowman, but definitely not the only one. In fact, there's been a long list of Shadowmen throughout the centuries that have inherited the burden that is the Mask of Shadows and the task of protecting the world against threats coming from Deadside. Here's the letter that Maxim St James left for his predecessor after leaving his work unfinished due to him sensing the presence of Legion back in November 1888, 23rd November 1888. Dear friend, although centuries may have passed by the time that you read this note, I know that I greet you both as a friend and as a brother, for I in my time have also borne the burden that is the Mask of Shadows. Know then that I constructed these passageways, the Paths of Shadows, as pathways through the place known as Deadside, so that we and those who also bear the mask might bring order to this realm and traverse it without hindrance. In my time, I have gathered and catalogued many of the ancient artifacts of power, some of which reside within this chambers. However, I fear that I must leave my work incomplete. A seed of darkness has come to this realm, more powerful than has been felt in centuries, and so I find it necessary to seal the Paths of Shadows, lest they and the artifacts within them fall into the hands of evil. The task of securing these passageways has been an immense labor, and I fear that with my weakening powers, these outer gates have not been secured as strongly as those deeper within the paths. Know then that the way ahead shall require much greater strength than that which brought you here. In addition to the catalogue of artifacts, find here enclosed Les Cartes de Prophétie, the prophecy spoken to the ancients by the mighty Lowa. I fear that the darkness I sense on this day might be that of which Les Cartes speak of, but fate has made it my charge not to challenge the darkness. Instead, my labor is to secure this passageway so that, come the time of prophecy, when evil shows its true form, they may be reopened and the relics uncovered. Maxim St James. The Shadowman's origin. According to the official acclaimed strategy guide, the Shadowmen of ancient times were African warriors blessed by the gods with supernatural powers to protect their native tribes from threats emanating in Deadside. However, with the advent of slavery, the lineage of the Shadowmen was broken and almost died out. Bad ending. For those who finished the game without falling to Legion, you may have missed this cinematic. When Shadowman is defeated by Legion, the prophecy in the way Legion envisioned it fulfills, as his army, fueled by the power of the dark souls that lie within Mike and extracted by Legion, is sent to Lifeside to punish its inhabitants and bring about the end of all things.
This is the way the world ends, Michael. Not with a bang, but with a whimper. Goodbye.
Oh God, no! Shadowman!
With a whimper.
SuperGreatFriend. SuperGreatFriend refers to a YouTuber that apparently started his channel with a Let's Play video series of Shadowman. Considering that Shadowman is not as popular as other video game franchises, he got tens of thousands of views on each of his videos, and I'm sure that thanks to him, Shadowman gained more attention. Some of the charm of these videos is the fact that SuperGreatFriend added notes to his silent playthrough with many interesting and funny observations. Also, as soon as Shadowman Remastered came out, he also made a Let's Play video series of this game, but this time with commentary, and it's as awesome as his previous Let's Play. Shadowman's Second Coming. Shadowman Second Coming is the sequel to Shadowman. I have to confess that I never got to play it. Second Coming has been heavily criticized due to its aesthetic departure, as Mike looks like a completely different character with an over-exaggerated bulk. I think this was done to distinguish Mike from Shadowman in terms of their particular abilities. The adventure is considered to be linear in comparison to the forking paths and mazes that the first Shadowman game is known for, and the cartoony visuals of the game aren't anything like those of its predecessor. In spite of the criticism, the game received average reviews, and I get the impression that most of its criticism is due to the fact that it's not similar enough to its prequel, and not because it's a bad game. In fact, there have been efforts to remaster this game, although it seems like an almost impossible task as the vast majority of the source code and assets have been lost. Let me know in the comment section what your experience with Shadowman Second Coming was. Aliens. I'm not referring to the Area 51 mode, but to the fact that there's a secret portal in the Mojave Desert in Shadowman Remastered that leads you into a UFO with grey aliens. I know it's intended to be a fun Easter egg, because those beings are simply Deadsiders with the model of a grey alien, but it would be interesting to know what role they would play in the Shadowman universe. Soulgates inspiration. According to Acclaim's strategy guide, the Soulgates in Shadowman were based upon a giant piece of industrial air ducting from a demolition site near the Acclaim Studios Deadside's offices. Home Improvement Killer's Tape. There's unanimous agreement on who the most deranged of the 5 serial killers is. I'll leave you with the chilling tapes he recorded of his victims, and you'll understand why.
He asked him, "What is thy name?" Yeah. And he replied, "My name is Legion, for we are many." Yeah. Yes! What is thy name? And he answered, saying, "My name is Legion, for we are many." What is thy name? And he replied, "For we are many. For we are many of us."
Marco's speech was done in a single take.
Hey there, brother! Yo! What's happening, my man?
Corey Johnson was the voice actor who dubbed Marco Cruz and Milton Pike. In spite of the complexity of some of their speeches, especially talking about Marco, he recorded both characters' speech in one take. The Saraf Queen. One of the most anticipated bosses in Shadowman that didn't make it into the first game is the Saraf Queen. She was first seen in the Book of Shadows in the original game as concept art, and she appeared in Shadowman Remastered long after the game was released. Her origin is unknown, but we can see some parallels between her and the Sisters of Blood. It is said that she could be a corrupted Sister of Blood who aligned with Legion's plan, but this is mere speculation. The most interesting fact about her is Shadowman's reaction when he sees her for the first time. Mike's fear is evident in his words, something that hadn't happened to that extent even when he faced Legion.
You gotta be goddamn kidding.
Your failure will bring up the splitting of the world.
Jesus.
Let his blood, drawn by the child, is the matter of the land. Drawn to death!
Oh, shit.
Deadside Fetus. Before the remaster was released, many assets went unused in the original game, but were found within the game's data. One of the most intriguing was a fetus inside a sphere that looked out of place. It's unknown who this creature is or what it represents, but Shadowman's weapons automatically lock onto it when he gets close, indicating that this fetus is an evil entity. Secret Teddy Bears. We're familiar with Luke's teddy bear. Nonetheless, a series of hidden teddy bears were implemented in later versions of the remaster, and when I say hidden, I mean it. I was playing Shadowman in 2021 and I got caught in the hype of the game, so when looking for information about it on YouTube, I noticed that people were finding secret teddy bears present on each level. With this in mind, I started exploring some levels, and I happened to be the first person to report the teddy bear location on Down Street Station, London. However, some of the teddy bear's original locations have been recently changed, so I would recommend watching the most recent video on YouTube on the matter. If you gather all of them, you'll have access to a secret weapon called the Bloody Teddy Bear. Out of Bounds Exploration. YouTuber Slippy Slides made an interesting video exploring beyond the boundaries of the game. Among this, there are a couple of Easter eggs you're about to see. Unused Iguana cutscenes. There are some unused cutscenes within the game's files, one of them containing that iconic iguana from Iguana Entertainment eating a duppy. Take a look. The Blind Man. Believe it or not, Jack the Ripper wasn't initially planned to be the architect who designed the asylum. According to one of Acclaim's anecdotes, the appearance of Jack the Ripper in Shadowman arose when our producer was describing how the asylum should look to our production artists. It should look Victorian, as if it were designed by Jack the Ripper himself. We all stopped, looked at one another and smiled. Until that point, the London Underground was populated by a faceless killer called the Blind Man, who we were struggling to get to grips with. Strange rooms in the Playrooms. The Playrooms is the scariest place in all of Deadside. As if it weren't enough, there are several rooms that contain very strange symbols and messages. I'll leave footage of these rooms, and maybe in the comments you can tell me what your interpretation of these places is. Mistake in the Spanish dub. Shadowman was dubbed into several languages including Spanish. At the very beginning of the game, we can spot a mistake said by Legion in this language, as he mentions that
El poder inmortal que buscas no existe.
meaning the immortal power that you seek doesn't exist. This is obviously a mistake, given that Legion says,
The immortal power that you seek does exist.
with does being an emphatic auxiliary. Nonetheless, it's possible that while translating, the people in charge of it thought it was a typo of doesn't. The correct translation would be El poder inmortal que buscas sí existe. Unused Lines. Several pieces of dialogue were later reused in Shadowman Remastered. However, there are still a couple of lines that aren't used anywhere in the most recent version. For example, before your final confrontation with Legion, he takes the form of several characters, including Nettie and Batrachian. Nonetheless, there are a couple of lines that were supposed to be spoken by Legion in the shape of Luke that read as follows: You are the soul fire at its great dark heart. Rise to the throne of your apotheosis, and with your passing, bring forth a new age. Yort is an enemy introduced in Shadowman Remastered, and it even has a cutscene where Shadowman reacts to his presence. Nonetheless, more unused lines can be found in the original game's data, and it says the following: You know who I am, let me pass. All of Deadside is my kingdom, Yort, for you shall know that all things must bow before the flaming sword of my righteousness. Let me pass, Yort, or so help me. I'll go clean through you, have it your own way. Marco Cruz has a lot of unused dialogue in the original, but part of this monologue wasn't reintroduced in the remaster. It's all about the numbers, man, but you can't go into space on numbers. You can't like fly on a 5, cruise on a 9. It's an abstract concept. It's like semantic numeracy. The reality takes you further. In a white panel tube speeding through a void, man. It's a Major Tom territory, and ground control's no longer there. It's not clear where this speech was intended to be used, but here it is. It's Judgment Day, time to tear that dark soul from the body of the beast. My God, this is the gateway from Asylum, the place where the armies of the damned shall make their attack upon the world of the living. You must be familiar with the first conversation between Mike and Nettie happening in the church. While the first lines are the same, the rest of the conversation is completely different. Said the spider to the fly, there's a darkness coming. The 5 are red in tooth and claw, to make the way for apocalypse. A Deadside dream, a prophecy steeped in blood, a whisper from the wasteland. In that asylum of the heart, where the darkness is visible, stand the many, the head, the hands, the teeth, the eyes, all combined to create the 5. All shall combine neath the engine bleak. The savage souls, and their vengeance wreaked upon an unsuspecting world. This is the future, your destiny. Shadowman. Shadowman. There are also several unused voice clips belonging to Jonty, suggesting Shadowman to go see Nettie.
There's not much more I can tell you right now, Michael. Go see Nettie. What more can I say, Michael? Why don't you pay a visit to Nettie? What do you want now? Go bother Nettie. Nettie will be more help to you than me. Look, just go away. Go see Nettie.
Light Soul. A light soul is the counterpart of a dark soul, and it didn't show up in the original game until the remaster. This collectible allows the shadow gun to be permanently charged without the need to power it up. Also, magic is replenished without the need of skulls, and many of the voodoo weapons are improved. There's more to what exactly light souls are, but we'll see that later in the Iceberg. Revolver Quest. The Revolver is the latest weapon added to the game, and getting it is anything but easy. First, you have to play the game on the hard difficulty, where enemies are faster, stronger, and drain your health quickly. On top of this, you aren't supposed to die, and you have to collect 500 Cado, items that are everywhere both in Liveside and Deadside. Normally, once you collect 100 of them, you can offer them to the Lowa to extend your life meter and make your adventure easier, but in this case, you shouldn't offer any Cado, meaning that you have to play an already difficult mode with limited energy. After defeating the final boss under these conditions, you'll see a password that represents a series of inputs that you need to press on the main menu to unlock the new Adventure Plus option. Start a new game on the Horror difficulty, get Luke's teddy bear and go to Deadside. As soon as you arrive there, get rid of all Deadsiders you first encounter but one, and let it drain your energy at least 14 times. For this, you'll have to die several times. Get rid of that Deadsider and you'll be able to collect a huge life force. Now, go to this part of the Gates, stand next to this wall and teleport to Liveside. Instead of teleporting to the church, Mike will appear at the Wild at Heart. Play the Pong arcade machine, beat it on the highest difficulty, and where your Shadow used to be, you'll find Marco's revolver. The Sisters' Reversed Speech. The Blood Sisters, guardians of the dark souls in the temples, can be heard speaking in an unknown language, but in reality their words are reversed. This is what they're really saying.
Man, Lord, seeker, soul.
Fish in the playrooms. I've been replaying Shadowman for over 2 decades and I never noticed this Easter egg. If you dive into the blood near the Teddy Bear Warp area, you'll spot a cute little fish between 2 pieces of seaweed. Shadowman Beta. Shadowman has been quite well documented throughout the years, as we can find a lot of images and footage of unused content as well as very primitive prototypes. I'll leave the most interesting here. Marco Cruz's secret message. In Shadowman Remastered, there's a very obscure Easter egg I managed to discover on the Mojave Desert level. You can hear Marco's theme playing in certain areas of the level. If you shoot all the speakers playing that music, this message will play.
We have been broadcasting to you live, KILL from the end of the world's archive and the showman. This is Marco Cruz signing off. Thank you and good night. Yeah!
Lost Enhanced version. The GeForce 256 is Nvidia's first GPU, released in 1999. Why am I talking about it? Well, because at some point, Shadowman had a graphically enhanced version for the GeForce 256 with more detailed models and environments. According to YouTube user Carrot250, who also happened to work on the Shadowman Remaster, the build was accidentally deleted after a failed attempt at backing it up. Thankfully, more than 23 years later, a partially completed build was recovered through the Duffy Dreamcast Collection project, a set of prototypes collected by a beta tester who worked for Acclaim and whose nephew recovered due to his uncle's passing. I'll leave you with footage by Carrot250, who was able to port part of this build to the remaster. Realms Beyond Lifeside and Deadside. We know what Lifeside and Deadside are at this point, but is there anything else beyond these two realms? When I was a kid, I thought Deadside was the equivalent of hell and that every soul would get there when they die. This, however, didn't make a lot of sense, considering that in one of Mike's monologues, he states that Deadside is the place where everyone goes without exception when they die. Also, the place is described as an infinite limbo, so I decided to ask people on the Shadowman fan club on Facebook about the matter. Deadside is the place where everyone goes without exception when they die. The place is literally filled with souls, which I believe are the people who didn't behave that well in Lifeside. Where are the good souls? Does Deadside have a better looking area for good souls? This is what happens when you finish the game for like the 10th time and you wonder a lot about the lore. Greetings to everyone. I was lucky enough to get an answer from composer Tim Haywood himself. Long before the time of the Shadowman, there was still a place where everyone went without exception when they died. Souls of dark and light came crossing through the void before moving on to other planes of reality. They would travel across that side to the Well of Souls and move on, but some souls of both light and dark hue remained in the wildness and they fought. The light souls built the City of Bones, a place of safety in the darkness, and they also built a prison to imprison defeated dark souls. The thing about lore is that it's a bit like history. The further back you go, the less direct information you have. I've managed to dig this up. How accurate it is? Well, we can leave that up to our own imaginations. This is an amazing bit of information that would have given hope to my younger version, because as a child, I thought that no matter how good of a person I could be, I would still end up in Deadside and be an eternal victim of all the madmen in the asylum. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this kind of content, consider subscribing to my channel. Don't forget to like and leave your thoughts in the comment section. See you in the next one.